After the age of 70, the need to maintain friendships that no longer bring joy often fades, not out of bitterness, but from a quiet understanding that not all connections are meant to be carried forward. What once felt like a necessity, keeping up appearances, answering every call, saying yes out of habit, now begins to feel like a burden that weighs more than it gives. At this stage, what most older adults truly crave is not more social invitations or constant engagement, but something far simpler and far more profound: peace, clarity, and the freedom to spend their days as they choose. In this video, I'll walk with you through 5 deeply honest reasons why you no longer need to hold on to friendships that no longer nourish you. These aren't theories or distant advice. They come from lived experiences, personal realizations, and the quiet wisdom that only time can teach. If you've ever felt that letting go of certain people has brought you more peace than keeping them close, this message is for you. I invite you to stay with me until the end, and if this speaks to your heart, go ahead and press subscribe, type "I'm ready" in the comments, and perhaps share a story of your own. Someone out there may need to hear it. Sometimes the deepest realizations come not during moments of noise, but in the quiet spaces where no one is watching. It often begins with a subtle feeling, perhaps while sitting alone at the breakfast table or during a slow walk through your neighborhood, where you start to sense that your own presence, your own company, has become more comforting than the presence of others. It's not loneliness, it's something softer, calmer, almost sacred. After 70, many begin to understand what the world never quite taught us: that fulfillment doesn't come from the people around us, but from the peace we've created within ourselves. And the older we get, the more we see that the most important relationship we will ever tend to is not with a group, a friend, or even a family member. It is with the person we wake up to every morning in the mirror. You see, for decades, we've played our parts. We've been the ones others could depend on: the mother, the husband, the caregiver, the colleague. Our calendars were filled not just with appointments, but with responsibility, loyalty, and constant motion. But now, in this stage of life, there's an invitation to lay it all down, to stop chasing approval, to let go of the idea that our worth is tied to how often we're seen, needed, or invited. Many older adults find this season surprising, not because they're alone, but because they've finally been given space to hear their own thoughts, to breathe without apology, and to remember the parts of themselves they once put aside for the sake of everyone else. There's a retired teacher I know who once told me that after stepping out of the classroom, the hardest lesson she learned had nothing to do with students or chalkboards. It was learning to enjoy a quiet morning without needing anyone else to validate her day. She started each morning planting herbs, sipping chamomile tea, and writing letters she never planned to send. She wasn't performing for anyone. She was simply being herself, for the first time in years. And it changed her. She didn't lose her friends. She just stopped needing them to remind her of who she was. When you embrace solitude not as a void, but as a form of wholeness, you begin to reclaim your identity. Not the version others remember you as, but the one you've always been, beneath the layers of obligation. And this shift is not small, it's life-changing. Because when you no longer rely on outside voices to echo your worth, you become lighter, freer, more alive. You start doing things not because they're expected of you, but because they nourish your spirit. You begin living at your own pace. You grow into the kind of inner stillness that doesn't need permission to exist. This isn't about pushing people away. It's about welcoming yourself back. It's about standing in the quiet and realizing that, after everything, you are still whole, still growing, still enough. And sometimes the most meaningful companionship we will ever find is the one that blooms in the garden of our own stillness. And perhaps once you've remembered how to enjoy your own company, you begin to notice something else, a quiet shift in what you value. There was a time, maybe not too long ago, when full calendars felt like a badge of honor, when Sunday brunches, phone calls, and gatherings filled the week with a sense of purpose. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, that same pace starts to feel heavy. What once energized now drains, and the very things that once made life feel full now feel like noise. Not because those moments weren't real, but because you've changed. And with that change comes a new kind of wisdom, one that whispers gently, Peace is not the absence of connection, but the presence of calm. It's hard to explain to someone who hasn't lived long enough to understand it, but the truth is, quiet becomes a form of healing. It's not just about resting your body, it's about resting your heart from the weight of constantly being on, constantly responding, attending and engaging. Many older adults begin to crave silence not out of sadness, but because they've discovered how nourishing it can be. The soft hum of a home with no voices but your own, the freedom to say no without guilt, the joy of doing nothing and still feeling whole. These are not signs of withdrawal. They are signs of arrival. You see, peace after 70 is not a luxury. It is a form of medicine, one that eases not only the tension in your shoulders but the pressure in your soul. It's in the gentle rhythm of a slow morning walk, the quiet rustle of wind through trees, the comfort of an afternoon nap without apology. It's what happens when you stop trying to meet unspoken expectations and begin living by your own inner rhythm. And it's often in this space that we realize how much of our energy used to be spent on things we never truly needed, just habits that once made sense in another life, in another version of ourselves. There's a man I often see sitting by the window of a small cafe, same time each week, with a paperback book and a look of deep contentment on his face. He told me once that after losing his wife, people kept urging him to get out more, to stay busy, to rebuild his circle. But he said what helped him most wasn't more activity, it was less. Less noise, fewer obligations, and a lot more space to breathe. He said, "I'm not rebuilding a circle, I'm rebuilding my peace." And in that sentence there was a kind of truth that needed no explaining. So, if lately you found yourself stepping back from conversations that go in circles, from invitations that feel like routines, from people who only call to complain, know this: you're not withdrawing from life. You're embracing a new kind of aliveness, the kind that comes not from the presence of many, but from the profound stillness of finally listening to yourself. And as the stillness begins to settle in, as you find yourself choosing peace more often than presence, another realization gently rises to the surface. Your time, now more than ever, is sacred. It's no longer something to be filled just because the hours are available. It's something to be honored. In youth, we spent so much of our energy rushing, pleasing, responding, being everywhere for everyone, often without even asking ourselves if those moments truly mattered to us. But after 70, when the pace of life softens and the noise dims, you begin to see your time differently. It becomes clearer that every hour carries weight, that every choice is a reflection of how you wish to spend your remaining seasons, not in performance, but in presence. Not out of habit, but out of genuine care for what nurtures your heart. You may begin to notice that the things which once seemed urgent, checking in, following up, attending out of politeness, now feel like intrusions, not obligations. It's not selfishness, it's self-respect. A kind of wisdom that comes only with age, the wisdom that asks quietly but firmly, "Is this how I want to spend my day?" The older we grow, the more we understand that time is not something we manage, it's something we protect. And with this understanding comes permission. Permission to decline what feels empty, to walk away from what drains you, and to choose every single day what truly feels right. There's nothing unkind about choosing yourself. In fact, it's one of the kindest things you can do, for your spirit, for your peace, and for the life you have yet to live. I once spoke with an older gentleman who told me he used to attend every neighborhood potluck, not because he enjoyed them, but because he didn't want to seem rude. After turning 80, he realized he was spending more time making casseroles and small talk than doing the things that actually brought him joy, like restoring his old motorcycle or taking long drives at sunset. One day, he asked himself a question. That changed everything. If I only had 100 mornings left, would I spend one of them pretending to laugh at the same stories I've heard for years? And from that moment forward, he stopped living from obligation and started living from intention. When you begin to see your time as a gift, not a currency, you stop giving it away so freely. You become intentional, gentle, and deliberate, not just with how you move through the day, but with what and who you allow into it. And in doing so, you discover that joy doesn't come from filling the calendar. It comes from choosing, moment by moment, what makes your soul feel alive. So if lately you've found yourself hesitating before saying yes, or feeling relief when plans get cancelled, that isn't laziness or age catching up to you. That's clarity. That's self-respect. That's the quiet beginning of a life more rooted in meaning than in maintenance. And once you begin choosing how you spend your time with more care, you may also begin noticing who you spend it with, and, more importantly, who you no longer feel the need to. Over time, something shifts not just in your routine but in your heart. You start to see certain friendships for what they truly are. Not cruel or harmful, but no longer mutual. They once served a purpose, perhaps during the younger years of raising children, building careers, or managing the chaos of everyday life. But now at this stage, when your soul yearns more for peace than performance, you begin to understand that not every relationship needs to be carried into this next chapter. And the surprising part is that this realization doesn't come with bitterness, it comes with relief. There's a soft kind of grief that often follows aging, not just from loss through death, but from distance, disconnection, and the quiet. Endings no one really talks about. The friend who stopped calling, the ones you only hear from when they need something, the conversations that used to feel rich but now feel rehearsed. And slowly you begin to feel the emotional weight of always being the one who reaches out, the one who adjusts, the one who keeps the thread alive, even when it's unraveling. It's not a loud disappointment, it's a quiet ache, a noticing, a slow release. And it's in this release that something healing begins. You realize that letting go is not a failure, it's a form of self-respect. You stop blaming yourself for what changed, and instead start accepting that not everyone was meant to walk with you the whole way. Some people were chapters, not conclusions. And when you free yourself from the need to maintain relationships, out of habit or guilt, you reclaim space in your life for what truly matters. Quality over quantity, meaning over maintenance. Maybe it's one friend who truly gets you. Maybe it's your dog who waits for you at the door each morning. Or maybe it's just you, your journal, your thoughts, your peace. I remember an older woman I once sat beside at a garden workshop. She told me she used to host a women's tea group every Friday for nearly 20 years. But over time, the group changed. The warmth turned into comparison, the laughter became polite, and eventually, she stopped looking forward to it. So, one Friday she simply didn't go, and no one called to ask why. At first she felt hurt, but then unexpectedly she felt free. She spent that afternoon walking through her garden alone, trimming roses, and for the first time in a long time, she said it felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. There's a unique freedom in choosing less social obligation, less pressure to keep connections alive, just for the sake of history. Because when you stop investing in relationships that no longer nourish your spirit, you begin making space for something far more sacred, your own emotional well-being. And in that space you find calm, you find clarity, and you finally understand that fewer friendships don't mean less love, it means more of the right kind. And maybe the most liberating realization of all comes not from what you've let go of, but from what you've stopped needing, especially the need to prove yourself. For so much of our lives, we are measured by how others see us. We're taught to be agreeable, dependable, sociable, to belong, to be liked, and we try, sometimes for years, even decades, to meet those unspoken standards. We dress for others, we speak in ways that soften our truths. We show up to things we no longer enjoy, just so no one feels disappointed. But after 70, something remarkable begins to happen. Not all at once, but slowly, like the way light changes at sunset. You begin to understand that your worth was never supposed to come from their opinions. Who you are, in your quiet moments, when no one is clapping and no one is watching, has always been more than enough. There's no longer a need to explain yourself, no pressure to attend events you no longer enjoy, no urge to respond quickly just to be polite. You start to live by your own rhythm, your own truth, and for perhaps the first time in a long time, you feel the difference between being seen and being understood, and you no longer crave the first if it costs you the second. This shift isn't about becoming indifferent, it's about becoming inwardly whole. And that wholeness allows you to walk through the world with a quiet kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need applause to feel valuable, the kind that doesn't need validation to feel at peace, the kind that simply is. I once knew a man in his 70s who had always been the life of the party. People expected it of him, his jokes, his energy, his presence. But over time, he started to feel like he was playing a character in a show he no longer wanted to perform. One day, he told me, "I think I'm done trying to be impressive. I just want to be real now." And that was the moment his life changed. He started spending more time alone, not out of sadness, but out of truth. He began painting again, cooking slower meals, sitting on the porch without a phone in his hand. And the remarkable part, he was finally deeply content. Because when you stop performing for the world, you return to yourself. You remember what brings you joy without needing to share it for approval. You move through the day with a gentler pace. You forgive more quickly. You laugh at your own thoughts, you rest without guilt. And through it all you realize that the only person you ever really needed to prove anything to was the younger version of yourself, the one who wondered if peace like this was ever possible. So if lately you've felt less interested in pleasing others, or explaining your choices, or staying in relationships that no longer feel aligned, trust that. That's not you giving up, it's you coming home. And what a powerful, quiet, sacred homecoming that truly is. As we close this conversation, let this message linger gently in your heart. After 70, you are not required to maintain friendships that no longer bring peace, purpose, or joy. You've earned the right to choose quiet over chaos, solitude over social pressure, and simplicity over emotional weight. This stage of life is not about isolation. It's about clarity, freedom, and honoring your time, your energy, and your truth. Embracing independence doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you've started caring differently, especially for yourself. If today's message reminded you of your own journey, I invite you to share your story in the comments below. Because your voice, your lessons, and your wisdom could be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you know someone who may be quietly struggling with the weight of old expectations, feel free to pass this along. Together, we can remind each other, life after 70 can be lighter, clearer, and more fulfilling than we ever imagined.